The first thing Officer Caleb Rourke did was shove his way through the sliding glass doors like the hospital belonged to him. Rainwater dripped off his patrol cap and darkened the shoulders of his uniform. His jaw worked like he was chewing on something bitter. Behind him, two EMTs rolled a gurney at a jog, wheels rattling, stretcher frames squealing as they fought the friction of the wet tile. Move, Rourke snapped. Not to the crowd, but to the building itself. His hand shot out and caught a black nurse by the upper arm as she crossed in front of him with a medication tray. The metal cups clinked. The tray pitched. A paper cup of pills skittered, white tablets bouncing across the floor like teeth. The nurse didn't cry out. She didn't jerk away. She simply turned her head and looked at where his fingers dug into her sleeve. "Don't touch me," she said, quiet enough that the words didn't travel far, but sharp enough to cut. Rourke tightened his grip anyway, as if her calm offended him more than any scream would have. "You people always got an attitude," he said, voice rising. "I've got an injured officer in my car, and you're spilling candy on the floor." Her eyes dark, steady lifted from his hand to his face. Her badge clip swung slightly against her scrub top. The name printed there read, Nia Washington, RN. She set the tray down on the nearest counter with deliberate care, like she refused to let him turn her into a spectacle. Then she reached up and peeled his fingers off her arm one by one, not aggressively, methodically. Each finger straightened as if obeying a rule it didn't understand. Rourke stared at his own hand as if she'd slapped him. "Touch me again," Nia said, still calm, "and I'll have security remove you. Now tell me what you need." The EMTs didn't stop. They pushed past the standoff, the gurney's wheels cutting a wet line through the scattered pills. The paramedic at the head looked back, eyes wide, but said nothing. Rourke leaned closer, close enough that his breath reached her. Coffee and chewing gum. Something sour underneath. "You're gonna have security remove me?" he repeated, mocking. "You think you're in charge here?" "I'm in charge of this triage bay," Nia answered. "And I'm in charge of what happens to anyone who walks into it, including you." His face reddened. A few people in the waiting area looked away instinctively, like they'd learned it was safer not to witness. A mother pulled her child closer. A clerk at the front desk froze with her hand hovering over a keyboard, pretending to read a screen she wasn't seeing. Rourke's voice dropped into something more intimate, more dangerous. "You don't talk to me like that," he said. "Not in my city." Nia didn't blink. "This is a hospital." Rourke's gaze slid to her ID badge, to her name, to the small photo. He looked like he was looking for an excuse that would let him do what he already wanted to do. He found one anyway. "My officer got hit responding to a call," Rourke said, loud again, making sure the room could hear. "He's bleeding, and you're standing here acting like you're the queen of this place." "I'll get him a bed," Nia said, "but you don't put your hands on staff." Rourke's mouth curled. He turned his head and shouted down the hall toward the trauma rooms. "Hey, I need a real nurse over here." A few heads snapped up. The phrase hung in the air, obscene in its casualness. Nia's face didn't change, but something in her posture shifted. Her shoulders squared, her weight settled evenly on both feet. Her hands rested at her sides, fingers loose, ready. "What's your officer's name?" she asked. Rourke gave a short laugh, the kind that didn't contain humor. "You don't need his name," he said. "You need to do what you're told." "I need his name for intake," Nia said. "I need his allergies, his medications, his vitals. I need information, not your ego." That did it. Rourke reached for her badge lanyard and yanked it so hard the plastic clip snapped and the badge swung away, still tethered by a thin strap. Nia's head jerked forward slightly from the force. A gasp came from somewhere. A chair scraped. Rourke held the dangling badge between two fingers like something dirty. "Nia Washington," he read aloud, slow. "Registered nurse. Bet you think that means something." "It means I'm licensed," Nia said. Rourke's eyes were bright now, fueled by the attention, by the fear he felt in the room. "It means you're replaceable," he said, and stepped closer again. "And right now, you're obstructing a police emergency." "I'm not obstructing anything," Nia said. "I'm trying to treat your officer. Let go of my badge." Rourke didn't let go. He twisted the strap around his knuckles and tugged, pulling her closer with it, as if dragging a dog by its collar. Nia's heel slid on the wet tile. Her tray clattered when her elbow bumped it, pills still rolling underfoot like small bones. Two hospital security officers appeared at the end of the corridor, drawn by the volume. They slowed when they saw the uniform, hesitation flashing across their faces, trained to enforce rules, conditioned to fear the badge. Rourke saw them too. His grin widened. He lifted his chin, daring them. "Back up," he called. "This is police business." Nia's voice cut through it, low and steady. "Security, I need you to document this. He's assaulting staff." Rourke snapped his head toward her. "Assault?" He released the badge strap and shoved her shoulder instead. Nia stumbled back into the counter, metal rattling. A small vial of saline toppled and rolled, clear fluid sloshing. In that moment, the imbalance of power sharpened into something physical. A man with a gun and the city's permission versus a woman with scrubs and rules no one enforced when it mattered. Rourke's hand hovered near his holster now, not drawing, but letting the implication breathe. "You keep running your mouth," he said, "and I'll put you in cuffs right here. Disorderly conduct, obstruction, whatever fits." Nia's eyes flicked quick, almost imperceptible to the body camera click to his chest. Not every officer wore one. Rourke's had a black square mount but no lens, an empty bracket. Like a missing tooth. Her gaze returned to his face. "There's no camera on you." Rourke's smile turned thin. "You noticed that?" Nia didn't answer. The paramedics had pushed the gurney into an exam room now. Through the open door, a young officer lay pale, blood soaking through a makeshift bandage on his side. A medic pressed gauze harder as the officer groaned. Rourke nodded toward the room with a sharp movement. "Get in there," he ordered Nia. "Now, fix him, and try not to screw it up." Nia straightened from the counter. Her voice didn't rise. "I'll treat him," she said. "But you're going to step back and let us do our job." Roar stepped even closer instead, almost chest to chest. He spoke softly, for her alone. "You don't get to give orders," he said. "Not to me." Nia's eyes held his. "Then arrest me," she said. The room went still. Even the fluorescent buzz seemed to hush. Rourke's nostrils flared. For a heartbeat, it looked like he might actually do it. Might pull out cuffs and make a show of dragging her through the waiting area. A black woman in scrubs turned into a warning sign. Then his radio crackled, breaking the tension like a dropped glass. "Unit 12, the dispatcher said. "Be advised, federal personnel en route to Mercy General. Repeat, federal personnel en route." Rourke froze. Nia's expression didn't change, but the slightest pause followed, as if she'd been expecting that exact phrasing. Rourke pressed his radio button. "Dispatch, say again. Federal personnel for what?" Static hissed. Then, no additional details. "Stand by." Rourke lowered his hand slowly, like he was lowering a weapon. "Federal," he muttered, half to himself. Nia stepped around him and walked into the exam room without waiting for permission. Her movements shifted, instantly efficient, precise. Like a switch had been flipped inside her. She snapped gloves on, her fingers moving fast. She leaned over the injured officer. "Name?" she asked the medic. "Carter," the medic said. "Officer James Carter. Possible knife wound." Blood pressure dropping. Nia's hands pressed the dressing. Her voice was calm, steady enough to hold the panicking room in place. "James, listen to me," she said to the officer. "Look at my face. Stay with me. I need you awake." Officer Carter's eyes fluttered open. "Hurts," he whispered. "I know," Nia said. "You're going to feel pressure. Not pain. Pressure. Keep breathing." Rourke stood in the doorway, watching her work, anger and uncertainty mixing in his face like oil and water. He noticed things then that he hadn't noticed when he'd been busy humiliating her. The way she positioned her body between the patient and the door, controlling access. The way she issued instructions without asking. The way the paramedics obeyed without question. And the way she wore a simple, unadorned watch on her wrist, matte black, no brand visible, turned inward, as if meant to be read discreetly. Not a nurse's cute floral band. Something tactical. Rourke's eyes narrowed. Nia glanced up at him just once, and her gaze held no fear at all. Outside, the hospital's front doors slid open again. This time, the air that rushed in felt colder. Two men in dark suits entered first, not rushing, but moving with controlled urgency, their eyes scanning. They didn't look like hospital administrators. They didn't look like lawyers. Their hands were empty, but their posture suggested weapons kept elsewhere. Behind them came a woman in a windbreaker with bold gold lettering across the back. FBI. The waiting room's low murmur turned into silence, so complete it seemed unnatural. Rourke's face drained of color. The woman walked with purpose, badge displayed, eyes fixed down the hall. One of the suited men spoke quietly into an earpiece. Then a final figure entered. Tall, gray-haired, suit-tailored, no outerwear despite the rain. He had the weight of command in the way people moved out of his path without understanding why. The hospital lights reflected off his shoes like polished mirrors. The clerk at the desk stood up too fast, bumping her chair. The man didn't stop to introduce himself to anyone in the lobby. He didn't ask permission. He walked straight toward the trauma corridor like he already knew the layout. Rourke stared as if his mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. Director Hale, someone whispered near the vending machines, voice trembling with recognition from news clips and official ceremonies. FBI Director Malcolm Hale didn't look toward the whisper. He moved down the corridor, flanked by the two suited men and the woman in the FBI windbreaker. Security officers stepped aside, hands half raised, unsure whether to salute or vanish. Rourke stepped back into the exam room doorway, suddenly too large for the space, his earlier bravado evaporating. Nia kept pressure on the wound. She didn't look up until Director Hale reached the threshold. When she did, she didn't straighten like an employee greeting a VIP. She gave a small, controlled nod. Hale's gaze landed on her and held. A flicker passed through his expression, recognition, concern, something quieter than either. "Nia," he said. Rourke's eyes widened. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Hale's attention shifted to Rourke. The director's face remained composed, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Officer," Hale said, voice even, "step away from that doorway." Rourke blinked, then snapped his jaw shut and tried to recover the role he was used to playing. "Sir Director, this is an active police matter," Rourke said. "My officer's injured. This nurse, she's been obstructive. I'm handling it." Hale didn't react to the justification. He didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at Rourke, the way a judge looks at a man who still doesn't understand he's already been convicted. "You put your hands on her," Hale said. It wasn't a question. Rourke swallowed. She was. Hale's eyes shifted to the broken badge strap on the counter, to the scattered pills, to the red mark blooming on Nia's upper arm where fingers had dug in. Hale's voice remained steady. "You put your hands on her in a federal facility while she was performing duties on a federal task force operation." Rourke's face twitched. "Federal facility? This is a city hospital." Hale's mouth barely moved when he spoke, but the words hit like a gavel. "This wing is under federal protection tonight," Hale said. "Because a federal witness is here. Because federal personnel are here. Because an operation you do not have clearance for is underway." Rourke's eyes darted to the FBI agents behind Hale. They were watching him like predators that had already circled. Rourke forced a laugh that sounded wrong in the sterile room. "Sir, with all due respect, I don't know what you're talking about. That's a nurse. I needed her to do her job." Nia didn't look away from the bleeding officer, but she spoke, voice low, precise. "Officer Rourke came in shouting," she said. "He grabbed me, broke my ID clip, shoved me, and threatened to arrest me for asking him to stop touching staff." Rourke snapped his head toward her. "That's a lie." Nia's eyes flicked to Hale's. "He also said he needed a real nurse," she added. "In front of patients." Rourke's lips pulled back. "I didn't." Hale's hand rose slightly. A quiet command for silence. Rourke stopped talking mid-word without understanding why. One of the suited men stepped forward. His jacket opened as he moved, revealing a holstered weapon and a badge that flashed under fluorescent light. "Not FBI. Something else. Office of Inspector General. Officer Caleb Rourke," the man said, voice calm. "You are being detained pending investigation for assault, interference with federal operations, and potential civil rights violations." Rourke's laugh returned, louder this time, brittle. "Detained? By who? This is my jurisdiction." The woman in the FBI windbreaker spoke. "You don't have jurisdiction over federal protective detail." Rourke turned on her. "Protective detail? For who?" Hale didn't answer immediately. He looked at Nia again. The look held an unspoken question. Nia's hands kept working, but her voice softened slightly, carrying weight without volume. "James needs surgery," she said. He's not stable. Hale nodded once, then turned his gaze back to Rourke, colder now. You will step out, Hale said. You will comply. You will not raise your voice. You will not touch anyone. If you refuse, you will be restrained. Rourke's eyes flashed with a last, desperate attempt at dominance. He reached toward his radio as if calling reinforcements could bring his old world back. Before he could press the button, one of the agents behind Hale moved fast, controlled and caught his wrist. Rourke jerked. Get off me. The agent twisted his arm just enough to bend him forward. Not a show, a technique. Rourke's face contorted. Pain cracked his anger open. Hands behind your back, the agent said. Rourke looked around wildly, searching for support. The paramedics avoided his eyes. The security guards stood frozen, relief and fear mixing on their faces. No one stepped in. Rourke's voice rose into a shout. This is unbelievable! You can't do this! I'm a cop! Hale's face didn't change. Not in this room, he said. The agent guided Rourke out of the doorway. Rourke's boots scraped on tile. His shoulder hit the door frame. He cursed, loud, ugly. As he was pulled into the corridor, his eyes met Nia's. For the first time, uncertainty showed clearly in his expression. Something close to fear. Nia's gaze stayed steady. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply looked at him like he was a problem being handled. Rourke was taken down the hall, his protests echoing. In the exam room, the noise fell away, replaced by the wet sounds of urgent medicine and the steady beep of a monitor struggling to keep pace with the weakening heartbeat. Nia pressed gauze hard. James, she said, close to the officer's ear. Stay with me. You hear me? His eyes fluttered. Rourke, he whispered. He told me. Nia leaned closer. Don't talk, she said. Save your strength. But the officer's hand twitched, reaching weakly toward her sleeve, fingers trembling. He said, Don't tell about the cash. Carter breathed, words slurring. He said it's our cut. Nia's eyes lifted to Hale's again. A subtle exchange passed between them. Something long planned, something painful. Hale's voice was low. We got it, he said. Nia's throat moved as she swallowed. Then she refocused on the wound, on the bleeding, on the life slipping away as she let the larger story distract her. Or now, she ordered. Call trauma surgery. Tell them penetrating wound, hypotensive, possible organ injury. A nurse in the corner, pale, nodded fast and ran. The FBI agents held position by the door, watching the hall, watching everything. Their presence changed the air. The hospital staff moved differently, now less hesitant, more certain. In the corridor beyond, Burke's shouting faded, replaced by murmurs and the clipped cadence of federal voices. Hale stayed in the room, not crowding, but not leaving. His eyes tracked Nia's movements, the way a man watches someone he trusts do something dangerous. Nia didn't ask why he was here. She didn't ask why tonight. The answers would come whether she wanted them or not. Within minutes, trauma surgery arrived. A surgeon with tired eyes and bloodless lips took one look and started issuing orders like a battlefield commander. The gurney rolled again, faster now, toward the OR. Nia walked with them, hands still pressing, maintaining the seal that kept Carter from bleeding out entirely. Hale followed just behind, flanked by agents, his presence incongruent in the sterile hall-like power wearing a hospital bracelet it didn't need. As they moved, people stared. A janitor paused with a mop. A family in the corridor pressed themselves against the wall. Phones rose, screens glowing, filming what they didn't understand. At the OR doors, the surgical team took Carter in. Nia scrubbed out quickly, hands moving through the ritual with practiced speed. Water ran red into the sink. When she finished, she stepped into the corridor where Hale waited. Up close, the director looked older than he did on television. The lines around his eyes were deeper. The control he carried seemed heavier. Are you hurt? Hale asked. Nia flexed her arm slightly. The red mark from Rourke's grip stood out against her brown skin like a bruise forming in real time. I've had worse, she said. Hale's jaw tightened. That shouldn't have happened. Nia didn't argue. She looked down the corridor where Rourke had been taken. Did he know? She asked. Hale's eyes narrowed slightly. Not until he decided to make you a target. Nia leaned back against the wall, exhaling slowly. The fluorescent lights hummed above them, indifferent. For a moment, She looked like any exhausted nurse after a violent shift. Then the subtle details returned. The inward turned watch, the way she scanned corners without thinking, the way her calm never cracked. Hale's voice dropped further. The recorder? Nia's hand went to the pocket of her scrubs and touched something small and hard. It's clean, she said. He said enough, more than enough. Hale nodded once, a grim satisfaction that never reached his eyes. Footsteps approached, fast. The woman in the FBI windbreaker arrived with a tablet in hand, face tight with urgency. Director, she said. OIG has work in interview 2. He's demanding a union rep. He's calling the chief. Local officers are gathering outside. Hale didn't flinch. Let them gather, he said. The agent hesitated, then added, he's also claiming the nurse assaulted him. Nia's lips pressed together for a brief second. Of course he is. Hale's gaze locked on the agent. What's the status on the warrant? It's signed, she said. We can move on the precinct as soon as you give the word. A silence fell, not empty, but loaded. The hallway seemed to tighten around them. Nia looked at Hale. He wasn't just a bully, she said quietly. He's part of it. Hale's eyes held hers. That's why you are here, he said. The words didn't sound like praise. They sounded like burden. Nia's face remained composed, but something heavier settled in her eyes. Then don't waste it, she said. Hale's expression hardened into something decisive. He turned to the agent with the tablet. Execute, Hale said. The agent nodded and walked away quickly, speaking into her earpiece as she went. Nia watched her go. In the distance, a stretcher squeaked, a monitor beeped, and someone cried softly behind a closed curtain. Hale remained with Nia in the corridor, the director of the FBI standing guard outside an operating room like any worried family member. But his eyes weren't on the doors. His eyes were on the systems beyond them, on a city that had learned to confuse authority with permission. The first siren started 20 minutes later, not the wail of ambulances, but the layered, purposeful chorus of federal convoys. Unmarked SUVs pulling into the hospital's secured entrance. Agents moving with windbreakers and rifles held low, radios murmuring in clipped codes. A machine waking up. Local police cruisers arrived too, but they stopped short. Officers stepped out under the awning, rain dotting their shoulders. They saw the FBI jackets. They saw the OIG badges. They slowed, confused, wary. Inside, in a small interview room off the administrative hallway, Rourke sat at a metal table, wrists cuffed, his face flushed with indignation. A camera in the corner recorded every twitch of his jaw. 2 investigators sat across from him, one from OIG, one from the Civil Rights Division task force attached to the operation. A file folder lay open, thick with printed pages and photographs. Rourke leaned forward, pulling at the cuffs as if they were an insult he could tear off. This is harassment, he said. You people don't get to come in here, and the OIG investigator slid a photo across the table. It showed Rourke outside a convenience store, accepting an envelope from a man with his face blurred. The timestamp was visible. The location was clear. Rourke's eyes flicked to it and away instantly, like his pupils had touched a hot stove. That's nothing, he said too fast. That someone can make anything look. The civil rights investigator didn't speak. She reached into the folder and placed a second item on the table. A transcript page, lines highlighted. Rourke's voice captured in text. You people always got an attitude. I need a real nurse over here. Not in my city. Rourke's mouth tightened. That's not. A third item, an audio waveform printout, a small device in an evidence bag. Nia's recorder. Rourke's breath hitched. He tried to hide it by scoffing, but the sound came out thin. Illegal recording, he said. That's inadmissible. The OIG investigator's voice was calm, almost bored. It was recorded in a public hospital corridor during an assault, and it's not the only recording we have. Rourke's eyes darted. What is this really about? You want to make an example out of me? Because I told a nurse to do her job? The civil rights investigator finally spoke, and her tone carried the weight of a courtroom. This is about you using your badge to intimidate, assault, and silence, she said. It's about you protecting a crew that's been running cash seizures off book and breaking people who don't pay. It's about a teenager in Ward 8 who ended up with a shattered jaw because he wouldn't confess to something he didn't do. Rourke's lips curled. I don't know what you're talking about. The OIG investigator leaned back slightly. Then you won't mind when we search your locker, your car, your house, and your bank records. Rourke's face twitched again, a crack widening. You can't. We already are, the investigator said. Outside the interview room, the hall filled with footsteps, federal agents moving through Mercy General's administrative wing to coordinate the next phase. A quiet siege. Back near the OR, Nia stood with her arms folded, watching the door as if her stare could keep Carter alive through sheer will. Hale stood beside her, phone to his ear, voice low. His expression never changed, but the muscles in his jaw shifted occasionally like he was biting down on anger. When he ended the call, he looked at Nia. The precinct is being secured, he said. Evidence collection teams are inside. Arrests are beginning. Nia nodded once, absorbing it. How many? She asked. Hale's eyes lowered briefly. More than one, he said. Nia exhaled. Her gaze drifted down the corridor where nurses moved past with carts, their faces drawn, their eyes flicking to the cluster of agents and then away. People are going to say it's politics, Nia said quietly. They always do, Hale replied. The ORA doors opened suddenly. A surgeon stepped out, mask hanging around his neck, hair damp with sweat. His eyes met Nia's. She pushed off the wall, moving toward him instantly. Is he alive? She asked. The surgeon's mouth tightened. He's alive, he said. For now. We got the bleeding under control, but the wound was deep. He's going to ICU. Nia's shoulders dropped a fraction. Relief hitting like a wave she didn't let knock her down. Hale nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement of the life held onto. As Carter was moved to ICU, Nia walked alongside, her presence steadying the chaos around the bed. In the elevator, the fluorescent light made the blood under her nails look black. When the doors opened to ICU, a group waited 2 FBI agents, a woman in a suit with a DOJ badge, and a man holding a camera that looked too professional to be news. Who's that? Nia asked, eyes narrowing. The DOJ woman spoke. Internal documentation, she said. Chain of custody. We're preserving everything. Nia's gaze sharpened. No filming his face, she said. The DOJ woman paused, then nodded. Understood. In the ICU room, Carter lay unconscious now, tubes and monitors surrounding him. Nia adjusted the IV lines with careful hands. She checked the bandages. She leaned in, eyes scanning for any sign of bleeding, any sign of decline. Behind her, Hale stood in the doorway, watching her, watching the patient, watching the agents outside. Nia didn't look up when she spoke again. He said, Cash, she said softly. He tried to tell me before surgery. Rourke told him not to talk. Hale's voice came from the doorway. He'll have protection, he said. Full detail, no local contact. Nia finally looked at Hale. He's a kid, she said. He's barely a year out of the academy. Hale's eyes remained steady. That's why they use them, he said. Silence fell again, thick with the recognition of how the machine worked, how it selected the young and the eager and taught them that loyalty mattered more than law. Nia's face hardened slightly. I want to speak at the hearing, she said. Hale's gaze held hers. You will, he said. 2 days later, the city woke up to a different kind of siren. News helicopters thudded over the downtown precinct, their blades chopping the morning air. Cameras clustered behind barricades as federal agents carried boxes of evidence out of the building computers. File folders, sealed bags labeled with case numbers. Officers stood on the steps in rumpled uniforms, watching, their faces blank, their hands clenched at their sides. Some looked furious. Some looked afraid. A few looked relieved, like they'd been waiting for someone else to finally do what they couldn't. Rourke was brought out in cuffs at midday. He tried to walk like he still wore authority. His shoulders were squared, his chin lifted, but the cuffs forced his hands low, and the cameras caught the small tremor in his jaw. He spotted a reporter and forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. This is a misunderstanding, he called out, voice loud. This is political. A federal agent guided him forward, firm hand at his elbow. A voice shouted from the crowd. What about the people you hurt? Rourke's eyes snapped toward the sound, angry. I didn't. The agent pushed him into the backseat of an unmarked car. The door shut. The sound was final. Inside a federal courthouse that same week, the air carried the dry scent of paper and old wood. The hallway outside courtroom 4B filled with attorneys in suits, agents in plain clothes, and families who had learned to hold grief quietly. Nia sat on the bench, hands folded in her lap. She wore a simple dark blazer over a plain blouse. Her hair was pulled back neat. Her face was composed, but her eyes were heavy with sleeplessness. Across from her sat two women and a man, community members, victims, witnesses. One of the women kept rubbing her thumb over a scar on her wrist. The man stared at the floor, jaw tight. Hale stood a few feet away, speaking quietly to the DOJ attorney. He looked like he belonged in a room like this, but his shoulders held a tension that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. When the courtroom doors opened, the group stood. The movement rippled down the hall like a tide. Inside, the room was colder. The judge sat above, expression unreadable, the seal of the United States behind him like a silent witness. Work entered from a side door, wearing a wrinkled suit that didn't fit his shoulders the way his uniform had. Without the badge, his face looked exposed. He tried to scan the room like he used to, trying to find control, trying to find someone to intimidate until looking away. His gaze landed on Nia. He froze. For the first time, his eyes showed the full recognition of what she had been. Not just a nurse, not just a someone he could shove in a hallway. She met his stare without blinking. Rourke's attorney leaned in and whispered something, but Rourke didn't hear it. His attention was locked on Nia like a man staring at the edge of a cliff he hadn't known was there. The prosecutor stood and began speaking, voice precise, cutting through the air with practiced clarity. The charges sounded clinical, but the details beneath them were ugly. Civil rights violations, obstruction, assault, conspiracy, evidence tampering, extortion under color of law. The prosecutor described traffic stops that turned into shakedowns, described bruises photographed in intake rooms, described missing body camera footage, described the code of silence that turned a badge into a weapon. Rourke's attorney objected twice. The judge overruled without looking up. Then Nia was called. She walked to the witness stand with controlled steps. She raised her right hand, swore to tell the truth, and sat. From the stand, she could see the entire courtroom, the judge, the jury box. Though this was a hearing, the attorneys, the agents, the faces of people who had been waiting for someone to speak plainly about what happened behind closed doors. Rourke stared at her with something like hatred, but it was diluted now by fear. The prosecutor's voice softened slightly. "Ms. Washington," she began, "what is your occupation?" Nia answered clearly. "Registered nurse," she said, "and special agent assigned to the FBI Public Corruption Task Force." A murmur moved through the courtroom, not loud, but unmistakable. People shifted. Heads turned. Rourke's face stiffened. His attorney's eyes widened slightly, then tightened, as if recalculating the room. The prosecutor continued, "On the night in question, why were you at Mercy General?" Nia's gaze remained forward. "To provide medical support and to observe," she said. "We had credible information that Officer Rourke and others were using the hospital as a point of contact to intimidate victims and to control injured officers who might cooperate. I was placed in triage as part of an operation." "And what happened when Officer Rourke entered the hospital?" Nia's voice didn't shake. She described it exactly: his grip, his words, the broken badge strap, the shove, the threat of arrest, the absence of a body camera. She described the way the waiting room went silent, the way security hesitated, the way power filled the corridor and left everyone smaller. As she spoke, she didn't dramatize it. She didn't need to. The facts were sharp enough. The prosecutor played the audio recording. Rourke's voice filled the courtroom, louder than it had been in the hospital, amplified and stripped of context that might soften it. Every word landed and stayed. The phrase "real nurse" drew a flinch from someone in the gallery. The line "not in my city" made the judge's eyes lift briefly, cold. Rourke sat rigid, jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped in his cheek. When the audio ended, the silence was suffocating. The prosecutor's voice was quiet. "Ms. Washington," she asked, "how did you respond when he assaulted you?" Nia's eyes shifted slightly, not toward Rourke, but toward the gallery where the victims sat. "I kept working," she said, "because there was a patient bleeding in front of me. because people don't get to choose when to be protected. Rourke's attorney stood for cross-examination, smoothing his tie with a hand that betrayed slight tension. Ms. Urbinum, Washington, he began, voice controlled. You're trained law enforcement. You were undercover. Isn't it true you provoked Officer Rourke to elicit a response? Nia looked at him. Her expression didn't change. I asked him not to touch me, she said. That's not provocation. The attorney pressed. But you refused to comply with his orders. I complied with medical protocol, Nia said. I refused unlawful behavior. The attorney's lips tightened. And your father is Director Hale, he said, attempting to inject insinuation into the room like poison. A few heads turned toward Hale. He stood unmoving, face impassive. Nia's eyes remained on the attorney. Director Hale is my father, she said, voice even. He is not the reason Officer Rourke assaulted me. Officer Rourke is. The judge's voice cut in, stern. Counsel, he said, stay relevant. The attorney swallowed and backed off, the move visible. Nia stepped down from the stand when she was dismissed. She returned to the bench, hands steady. One of the women beside her reached out and squeezed her fingers once, small and grateful. Rourke watched it happen. And something in his expression broke anger, giving way to the realization that the room had shifted permanently. The leverage he'd used on the street meant nothing here. By the time the judge ruled on bail, Rourke's face had lost its defiance. Given the nature of the charges, the judge said, voice echoing slightly in the wood-paneled room, and the demonstrated pattern of intimidation, this court considers the defendant a danger to the community and a flight risk. Bail is denied. Rourke's head snapped up. What? He blurted, unable to stop himself. His attorney grabbed his sleeve and whispered urgently, but Rourke was already rising, panic flashing across his face. This is insane, he shouted. You can't do this. The marshal stepped forward. Sit down, he ordered. Rourke didn't sit. His breath came fast. His eyes darted around the room as if searching for someone to rescue him. Someone to remind him he was still special. No one moved. The marshal grabbed his arm. Rourke jerked away instinctively, and in that instant, the marshal forced him down into the chair with a firm hand on his shoulder. The judge stared down, unimpressed. Remove him, he said. Two marshals cuffed Rourke again. The sound of the metal closing was loud in the quiet room. Rourke's face twisted, humiliation spilling out of him now, raw and uncontrolled. She set me up, he shouted, pointing toward Nia. She's FBI, this is a trap. Nia didn't react. She watched him with the same steady gaze she'd given him in the hospital hallway. No fear, no triumph, only the cold clarity of consequence. Rourke was dragged toward the side door. His shoes scraped. His voice rose into something almost pleading. I did my job, he insisted. I did what I had to do. The marshals pulled him out. The door shut behind him. The sound was final again, like a second verdict. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread. It didn't stop with Rourke. Search warrants turned into raids. Raids turned into arrests. A lieutenant was taken in for evidence tampering. 2 detectives were indicted for conspiracy and extortion. A union representative was caught on a wire suggesting a witness, remember who runs this city. The precinct's front steps became a revolving stage for handcuffed men who had once stood there giving press conferences about law and order. Mercy General changed too. Security policies tightened. Staff who had once lowered their eyes when uniforms entered began filing reports. Nurses started wearing discreet panic buttons clipped beneath their badges. The hospital created a protocol requiring law enforcement to remain outside treatment areas unless invited by medical staff. The administration stopped calling it best practice and started calling it safety. In ICU, Officer James Carter finally woke up with pain clouding his face. His voice was weak, his eyes were tired. But when Nia entered his room, he looked at her like he'd been waiting to see if she was real. You're FBI, he whispered, swallowing with effort. Nia pulled a chair close, sitting at eye level, her posture steady. Yes, she said. His eyes filled slightly, not with tears, but with something like shame. I didn't know, he said. I swear, I didn't know what Rourke was doing. Not at first. Nia's face softened just enough to be human. They count on that, she said. Carter's hand trembled on the blanket, Am I going to prison? He asked, voice cracking. Nia held his gaze. That depends on what you do next, she said. Tell the truth. All of it. Carter swallowed hard. His eyes shifted toward the door as if expecting someone to burst in. The fear was still inside him, trained deep. They'll kill me, he whispered. Or They can't reach you, Nia said. Not now. He looked at her. How do you know? Nia's voice remained calm. Because the people who thought they owned you are being taken apart, she said, and because you're not alone anymore. Carter's eyes closed briefly, his breath shaky. When he opened them again, something in his face had changed fear still there, but mixed with relief so fragile it looked like it might shatter. I'll talk, he said. Months later, the sentencing hearing for Caleb Rourke filled a courtroom again. This time, there was no uncertainty, no procedural suspense. The evidence had been laid out piece by piece. Recordings, bank transfers, witness statements, medical documentation, internal messages recovered from a phone he'd tried to destroy. Rourke stood in a jumpsuit now, hands cuffed in front. His hair was thinner. His face looked smaller without the armor of a uniform. He glanced at the gallery like a man watching strangers at his own funeral. Victims spoke. A mother described her son's bruised ribs and broken confidence after being pulled over for fitting a description. A man described cash taken from his glove box while Rourke smiled and told him it was evidence. A young woman described being laughed at when she asked for a complaint form. When Nia spoke, she didn't talk about herself first. She talked about the hospital, about the way staff froze when Rourke entered, about how easily violence hid behind authority when everyone was trained to comply. She described the red mark on her arm, now faded, but remembered. Rourke stared at the floor, his shoulders hunched, not in remorse, but in the posture of someone cornered. When Rourke's turn came to speak, he lifted his head, eyes scanning for a sympathetic face. He found none. I served the city, he said, voice hoarse. I did what I thought was right. People are twisting everything. I'm being made into. The judge's voice cut him off, sharp. You are not a victim of misunderstanding, the judge said. You are a perpetrator of calculated abuse. You use your position to intimidate, extort, and harm. You violated the public trust. You violated the law. Rourke's lips parted, stunned by the refusal to indulge him. The judge leaned forward slightly, eyes cold. The court sentences you to 14 years in federal prison, he said, followed by supervised release. Your civil rights investigations will proceed independently of this sentence. You'll never serve as a law enforcement officer again. Rourke's face strained. He swayed slightly, as if his body finally understood what his mind had been denying. In the gallery, no one cheered. The room held a heavy quiet, the kind that followed a storm when the air still tasted like lightning. The marshal stepped forward. Rourke turned his head, eyes frantic now, and his gaze landed on Nia again. For a heartbeat, he looked like he might beg. He didn't. Pride strangled the words before they could escape. He was led away anyway, chains clinking softly, the sound following him out like a shadow. Outside the courthouse, rain fell again, steady and cold. Nia stood beneath the awning with the community members who had testified. The woman with the scar on her wrist breathed out slowly, as if she'd been holding her breath for years. The man who had stared at the floor earlier looked up at the sky, blinking rain from his lashes. Hale approached, stopping a respectful distance away. His face held no triumph, only fatigue and something like solemn relief. Nia looked at him, her expression composed, but her eyes softening slightly. It's done, Hale said quietly. It's not all done, Nia replied. Hale nodded once. No, he said, but it's moving. A young nurse from Mercy General stood nearby, still wearing scrubs beneath a borrowed coat. She had come to watch, to see if it was real. Her hands were clasped tight in front of her like she was praying without words. She looked at Nia with something like awe. Nia met her eyes and gave a small nod, not a celebrity gesture, not a heroic pose. Just acknowledgement, like passing a signal down a line. The nurse's shoulders loosened, just a fraction. As people began to disperse, Nia remained under the awning for a moment longer. The rain blurred the streetlights into soft halos. Cars hissed by on wet pavement. The city kept moving, indifferent, as if it could pretend nothing had happened. But something had changed. A badge had been stripped of its myth. A hallway assault had been turned into evidence. A man who had confused fear for respect had been made to sit in a courtroom and listen to his own voice played back to him. Stripped of power, reduced to consequence, Nia stepped out into the rain, coat collar lifted, moving toward her car with measured steps. Behind her, the courthouse doors closed with a dull finality. The water ran down the stone steps and into the gutter, carrying away nothing visible, but leaving the surface cleaner than it had been. In the quiet that followed, justice didn't look like celebration. It looked like procedure. It looked like paperwork and sworn testimony and chains closing around wrists that had once grabbed whoever they wanted. And in that steadiness, unromantic, irreversible, the city learned that power could be questioned, recorded, and taken away.